of the Planning Review Committee. Can I ask if there are any apologies?
No apologies, convener.
The declaration of interest? Any declaration of interest from any members? No. The Planning Review Committee procedures. I'll ask Douglas to briefly explain the procedures to the committee.
Thanks, convener. Yes, I will be brief today. Just in summary, this is a review of an appointed officer's decision. So the first step for the committee is to assess the papers before them, and indeed what they'll hear from the planning advisor in due course, and to assess whether there's sufficient evidence and papers before them upon which to make a decision. There are other procedures available to the committee, namely further written submissions, a site inspection, or a hearing. But I think the committee would have to assess the papers before they resolve to carry out any of those further procedures. Just to clarify, as with any other planning decision that the committee makes, this is treated as effectively a de novo decision. So you have to assess the papers before you, but in effect you're making a fresh decision on this. And as with any other planning decision, it has to be made in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So you have to assess the policies that are in place at this point in time, and not necessarily those that were active or applicable when the review was made, and to make a decision accordingly, to weigh up those policies and to make a decision. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you. Anything the planners want to add at this stage? Procedures?
Nothing to add to the procedures, no.
Okay, that's fine. Can you take us through the application then?
Yep, sure. Thank you, convener. The review relates to a proposed new dwelling house on land to the west of Stoneburn House on Vallure Road. The house would be accessed from Vallure Road and would include space for parking and turning within the site. The property would be 1.5 stories, rising to 7.1 metres at its highest. Accommodation would be set across 2 floors with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms at first floor. The external finishes would be grey concrete roofing tiles with white render and grey facing brick elevations. The garden to the rear would measure 13.7 metres by 14.5 metres. The site itself is a grassed area running adjacent to a small tree belt along the boundary with Stoneburn House. The land is surrounded by open space to the west and south. There's no direct planning history associated with the application site. There are, however, historic applications from adjacent to the site, which are referred to in section 2 of the officer's report. The consultation responses are also noted in the agenda papers and also summarised in the delegated report. A number of the consultation responses made reference to possible conditions. 2 representations were received on the application, and these raised objections which are summarised in the delegated report. The application was assessed against the policies in the local development plan. This plan has now been superseded by Local Development Plan 2, and you've hopefully been provided with copies of some of the updated policies. For clarity, policy HSG03, windfall housing, has now become HC02. INF03, protection of open space, has become PE16, and policy INF02 remains similar in principle and relates to developer contributions. The wording of policies HSG03 and INF03 has changed, so I can go through those in more detail if that would be helpful later. The material considerations that the officer considered relevant to the application are noted in the delegated report. The reasons for refusal are also recorded in the decision notice and read as follows. The proposal is contrary to Falkirk Local Development Plan Policy HSG03, windfall housing, in that the area of open space to be lost cannot be justified through compensation by qualitative improvements in other parts of the green network as promoted through associated Falkirk Local Development Plan Policy INFO2, Developer Contributions to Community Infrastructure, and INFO3, Protection of Open Space. The second reason for refusal read as follows. The proposal is contrary to Falkirk Local Development, Falkirk Council Supplementary Guidance SG13, Open Space and New Development, where the loss of existing open space shall be compensated at a level equivalent to the commuted sum per square metre of the type of open space lost. Moving on to the notice of review, this is included in your agenda papers. The appellant contends that the site is not public open space and that the payment in lieu of the loss of open space is unreasonable, as the applicant is also purchasing a piece of ground from Falkirk Council. The appellant considers that this site is not open space but brownfield land. An area to the rear of the existing houses on Velour Road was occupied by bookmakers. Parking and an access track were located to the west of Stoneburn House. The appellant states that there is proposed a land swap with the council and the potential costs of compensatory payment to the council were not considered in the agreement to complete the land swap. The appellant has provided a list of expended amounts and anticipated amounts on the basis they consider the site unviable with the additional compensatory payment. I would just say at this point that planning applications have to be determined in accordance with the local development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. I mentioned previously that the wording of the policies has changed since determination of the original application, and if required I can display these on the screen and go through them with you. That's it, thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you for that. The application before us is it's quite clear in terms of the policies, but less clear in terms of the practices. You say that the recognition of the land ownership is in dispute. Has that moved on any since these papers were produced? Is it still in dispute?
It's not that they're in dispute, but the applicant was intending on buying an area of land to make the site large enough for the development. And in that process was also planning to do a land swap with the council for an area of land to the south of the houses on Velour Road.
The designation is in dispute in terms of
the designation. The appellant is arguing that it's not open space.
Yeah. Have we got clarification of the ownership issues? If it's not open space, then obviously another designation that you possibly slip into, and he maintains it's brownfield, in which case there should be a clear policy covering brownfield, and a clear policy that it can be drawn forward for that particular purpose. I would have thought that looking across this particularly well, I would have thought that the designation of the land, whether it be brownfield or whether it be the open space or whatever, would have been clear. We made clear with, first of all, the first local plan, and secondly, the recently adopted local plan.
Yeah, I think that.
You get
Sorry. Yeah. I think firstly you could probably have brownfield land, which is also open space, because brownfield land relates to whether it's previously been developed or not. So you could have land which had previously been developed, and then, you know, I think if you looked at the site, you would think perhaps it was open space. And it's been marked as open space in the local development plan and the previous local development plan as well.
Right. The issue of deeds, then come into it. Do we have deeds of ownership?
We don't have them as part of the planning application.
Right, okay. The first point we have to clarify is as a committee is whether we believe we've got enough information before us today to make a decision. our members minded.
Convener,
Provost?
thank you, Convener. Firstly, it's probably been the custom in the past that out of all the local review bodies, that 99% of them initially went to a site visit. Now, I don't know this area. It's quite a complex issue here in relation to what you were touching on just now, because of the situation with the applicant and the purchase of ground, and also the transfer of ground to the council. The issue about the disparity he's talking about in terms of the brownfield site, and what we're talking about is that the application warranted was made and approved to convert the bookmakers into a dwelling house. Now, I don't know the area, so I don't know what they're talking about with the bookmakers. I know we've got local members here. But the fact of the matter is, could I ask maybe a question through yourself, Convener, to Mr. Blythe? Because to be honest with you, I feel that I would have to have a look at this site. And just to ask Mr. Blythe, during this the problems with the pandemic, is there still an opportunity to go out and site, whether it's individually or in groups or in a minibus or whatever? Because I feel that it would be appropriate, because of the circumstances relating to the ground acquisition, etc., that we view this site. Mr. Blythe?
Excuse me, thanks, Provost. I think the answer to your question is yes. I think you can, a site visit can be undertaken. Obviously, we have to respect the current restrictions. I think the site, from my own knowledge, will be pretty easy to view from the main road. So, I think if that's the will of the committee, I think an appropriately socially distanced site visit could be carried out. It might be you want to defer consideration on that until possibly you've heard about the updated policies. So that might, sort of take your thinking in a particular direction. But in answer to your question, I think we're trying to restrict the number of site visits that are carried out for obvious reasons. But individual members may be familiar with the site from their own knowledge as well. And certainly a drive past, I think, would give members quite a substantial amount of knowledge, because it is visible from the main road as far as I know.
Thank you, Convener. It's been interesting to hear what other members have got to say, but that's my initial thoughts, is that I would like to go out and have a look at this area. Thank you.
Anyone else in the committee? Yeah.
Councillor Kerr?
Convener.
Yeah, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. I take on board what the Provost says regarding the location. I know that, and probably Gordon knows the area very well. If we go to page 44, Convener. As a drawing, and the kind of purpley bit at the back used to be where the bookmakers was.
Right.
And that's where the bookmakers was, and the car parking. But it was closed down a number of years ago and vandalised, and it was set on fire. So I knew that because I visited Madison on numerous occasions years ago. And as far as I can make out the papers, is the slightly pinker bit of ground is that the council are proposing to swap the two grounds. So the bit at the back was allegedly a brownfield site where planning permission could have been sought, but I don't know if the officers or the applicant says if we swapped it, it would keep it in line with the rest of the houses. So at the back is a huge big, obviously it's about twice the size of what the applicant's getting, so the council's getting twice the size of open space as what he's buying, it looks like. I think it's not us as a council. We've proposed to sell or swap the ground where he could have easily got a house at the back and a brownfield site. Then they've swapped it. Now we're saying no, you can't get it. I just think it's. When I read the papers, I thought, "Oh, that doesn't feel right, eh?" And I know every bit of ground gets taken on its merit, but reading the papers, the applicant could have easily just went and put a plan application for that site, eh? That's why I read it, Provost, convener. But I take and recognise this what the Provost says about not knowing the area, eh?
A local member is Councillor Hughes.
Yes, I was just basically saying, I'm going to say that I know the area very well, because it's on the corner of Cressella Drive, Vella Road is the War Memorial. And I've been to a number of, in the last couple of years, commemorations. The site is visible from the road. The only thing I wanted to check in terms of the pink and the purple ground, I take it that the council are being given the pink aspect in this page 44. Now, was that area? I'm just trying to clarify. Was that area the bookmaker's site, or was it the site where the purple is?
It's a purple, I believe.
That was the purple. Was
the bookmakers.
The bookmakers.
The pink.
Right. Thank you.
Convener, maybe I could just clarify. I think my understanding is Councillor Kerr highlighted that plan is quite illustrative, and I think that was a plan drawn up to capture the land swaps between the council and the applicant. So the area, the sort of purpley mauve colour, was the former bookmaker's site. That will be transferred to the council, and the pink area is currently owned by the council. That will be transferred to the applicant. So that has the result of increasing the width of the applicant's site, so they can add it on to their own ownership, and that then forms the application site. So, you know, the pink goes to the applicant and the mauve comes to the council. But as far as I understand it, that deal is just agreed in principle, and obviously the applicant is going through the planning process to try and tick that box as well.
Yeah, it's beginning to become a lot clearer. A lot clearer. Anyone? Sorry.
Sorry, convener. Thank you very much. Could I maybe ask a question through your good self, convener, to Mr. Blythe again in relation to this ground swapping? Does it seem to be the issue that the ground swapping would be and agreed with the council would be an encouragement for the applicant to think that he was going to get the application granted because of this added ground? And
I think
the fact that he'd done this deal with the council, did he think then that was a an open door for him to get the application. And was there, I mean, you've got to say, was there any discussions taking place regarding the house when the ground transference was going on?
I don't know the details of that, Provost. I mean, from experience though, I would imagine that the applicant would do his due diligence on a potential application site, and that would include issues like land ownership and planning. Now, in this instance, there seems to have been an opportunity to swap land in his ownership for land that's owned by the council to regularise the footprint of a potential housing application site. So that would have all, I think, been made clear by the applicant to the council as a landowner when those discussions were taking place. I'm quite sure that the council surveyor would have said, well, yes, we can agree a deal in principle, but for your own interests, it would be subject to you achieving planning permission. Otherwise, I mean, you know, and to be blunt about it, I don't think the applicant would be properly advised to shell out money for the land swap if he didn't have planning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and I think the point the Provost is making is that there must have been a sort of tacit agreement to the land swap and how that would fit into the planning process.
I think there would certainly have been heads of terms agreed by the applicant and the council in its landowning capacity to give the applicant the comfort to then embark on the planning application process.
Yeah.
Convener, can I just,
Yes, certainly.
Where the pink shaded area is, then the white area next to it, the 3111 metres, is that owned by the applicant?
As far as I'm aware, the majority of that is owned by the applicant, I believe, Councillor Kerr. I think if you sort of compare the plan, the application plan.
Yeah.
Just try to find a page number. Page number 6 in the papers. There's the location plan shown there with a black outline.
No, in my papers, Douglas, isn't it?
I beg your pardon. It's actually within the applicant's planning application, which is towards the front of your papers. It's enclosure 2.
Is there a number on that page, Douglas?
There isn't actually in my one.
Would it be helpful if I shared my screen and I can show you the plan on that?
Yes.
Yes.
I beg your, I think it's page 23, I believe, Councillor Kerr. It's dropped off the bottom of my set of papers.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So I think the application site is shown in black there on the location plan.
Yeah.
The yellow area corresponds to the former bookmaker's site, which was the mauve area on the previous plan. So you can see that if you compare that to the plan that we were discussing previously, the applicant owns roughly half of the application site at the moment.
Yeah.
The other half is currently owned by the council, but there's a deal in principle to convey that to the applicant.
I can see why
Yeah.
they would want to do the deal, because it makes it more proper in line with the rest of the houses, than having a house at the back of the area. Thanks for that, Douglas. Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, I'm so puzzled by what would appear to be lacking cooperation between the departments in this one. The
Yeah.
whose land is it at the moment? Who's in terms of the land that we're proposing to swap? Whose land is it at the moment? Which department?
I'm not sure which department it is. It's probably on the council's planning or roads account, or I think in terms of you know, that as I understand it, that deal has been agreed in principle, but obviously that won't be crystallised until until planning permission is either obtained or otherwise.
Exactly. So what we're really looking at is, and when we dig down, what we're really looking at is, do we agree to the exchange of land?
Well,
Effectively.
well, your role is to decide the planning application, convener. So if for argument's sake it's granted, then that would be the green light for the land deal to be concluded. If you refuse this application, then the likelihood is the applicant would have to think again. But as no land has actually changed hands or money has changed hands at this stage, then for the land swap, then you know, that's one less risk that's been taken on.
I certainly feel there's sufficient information in these papers, and the line that I would be looking to take would be minded to grant on the grounds that the exchange of land itself is the issue, as far as I can see, and the impact this has on the planning regulations, the planning policies.
I would agree with you, Convener.
Yeah. Convener, I would second you if you're going to move that, because the fact is that sticks out in relation to the which seems to be a complex, but it isn't really a complex issue, where there has obviously been discussions in relation to the land and the application. And I would agree with you. If you're going to move that, Convener, I'm quite happy to second you.
Certainly, I'm happy to move it. We need some advice with regards to the wording, in relation to policy issues. Sorry, Douglas.
Convener, sorry. I think maybe we can help you cut through it a wee bit, to be honest, because Catherine had mentioned earlier the updated LDP2 policies, which you know, do change the potential assessment of this application, and it you know, it may just help you sort of verbalise the reasons for the decision. I don't know if Catherine wants to just summarise the main policies, how they were assessed previously and how they've now changed. So that might just help to cut through this a wee bit.
No, okay, that's what we want you to do. We want you to give the wording for us.
we'll get there. Don't worry.
Hey, Catherine.
I think a lot of the discussion is about the loss of open space, and policy P16, which is about the protection of open spaces. The wording has changed. The wording has changed slightly, but you may find that it has significant impact. So I'll just read through it for you just now. Development which will result in the loss of open space will only be permitted where it meets certain bullet points. One of these is There will be no significant adverse effect on the overall recreational provision in the local area, taking account of the council's open space standards as defined within the open space strategy, or the loss will be compensated for by qualitative improvements to other open space in the local area, commensurate with its recreational value. Guidance on how loss of open space should be compensated is set out in Supplementary Guidance SG05, Green Infrastructure and New Development. Now that SG hasn't been to executive yet, so it doesn't have a material weight just now. But I think the policy can be broken down into two parts. Firstly, asking yourself whether the loss of this open space would have a significant adverse effect on the overall recreational provision in the local area, or whether the loss will be compensated for by qualitative improvements. So I think the first question in that policy is asking, will there be a significant adverse effect on the overall recreational provision as a result of the loss of this area of open space?
Convener, the open space issue that comes up regularly is always one for debate. And reading the notice of review of the application, it highlights this, and it says quite clearly that the site, this seems an odd approach given the previous use. It's only passive open space because the applicant has been trying to develop for the last 20 years. The site is therefore not open space, but given its previous use as purely brownfield or commercial, had the applicant fenced this ground, this would be apparent. In discussions starting around 2017 with Keith Rappin of Falkirk Council, the applicant negotiated the purchase of an additional piece of ground from Falkirk Council in exchange for a payment of £14,000. In addition, the applicant would transfer a significant piece of ground to the size of the site to the council's ownership. The applicant paid the council for Mr. Rappin and the council's advice, and the purpose of this was for Falkirk Council to identify all costs involved in gaining planning permission. There was no mention whatsoever about passive open space payment of £10,700. That was the whole point of paying Falkirk Council to confirm all costs before Mr. Porter went to the expense of making former detailed applications. So what they're really saying is that simplifies the issue as far as they're concerned, that they had been in direct talks in relation to an application that was coming in. They had said quite clearly that they believe it's a brownfield site, and what the council's getting in way of ground is far more than what they were having. And at the end of it, that when the detail was coming out for this chap, Mr. Rappin, there was no point that was made in relation to any paying of £10,700 in terms of open space. So it's that's obviously that's their version.
Yeah. Any comments or anything in Jutex, James? You have any comments with regards to that particular paragraph?
Yeah, I mean, as the provost says, that is the applicant's version. So Mr. Raffin is a surveyor for the council. I don't necessarily agree it would be Mr. Raffin's job to highlight any potential planning payments or compensatory payments that might fall out of a planning application. Mr. Raffin's remit would be to negotiate a deal for the swap of the land. So the applicant would have to have satisfied themselves on the planning position and any potential payments anyway. I think as Catherine was saying, whilst the policy has changed subtly, I think it has changed significantly, and I think the particular one that she highlighted there was whether there was any significant adverse effect on the overall recreational provision in the local area, and it did sound like the members were taking this issues around the land swap into consideration and coming to that, possibly come to that conclusion. Because as far as I'm aware, the land that the council will acquire, the site of the former Bookmaker site, understand that will be laid out as open space.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right. And so Gordon Hughes, you wish to come in. I'm sorry, James. And then Gordon.
Thanks,
Councillor
convener.
Kerr.
Thanks, convener. Douglas kind of took my fire there, his statement at the end. What we are saying is, or what the council, the officers are saying is, the pink bit of land is the loss of open space. But they're then gaining, just with the size, it looks as if it's double the open space back from the applicant. And if Gordon will verify this, convener, there isn't anything there now. That is just green open space.
That's correct.
So there isn't. It's 20 years for the bookies was demolished. So it's just green open space now. So I think the council's getting a better deal than what the applicant's getting because of the size of the land. But thanks anyway, convener.
I was just going to agree with Councillor Kerr, convener, because the actual open space that the council's gaining is actually part of an open, I would describe as an open park area where people walk their dogs and walk through. And basically it's an addition to the open space and would add to the open space rather than detract.
Yeah, Douglas, you've heard the views of the committee, and I think we're all in agreement that this application should be minded to grant, subject to the conclusion of the transactions that have been outlined in the report. I'm looking for formal words.
Well, in effect, convener, I think what I'm hearing is that the committee has taken on board the updated policies in line with LDP2, and that they're satisfied there's no significant adverse effect on the character or on the overall recreational provision in the local area. In effect, there's no there's no loss of open space effectively, and I think that would, in line with that policy, there would be no, as things stand, there'd be no need to seek a compensatory payment, so that the committee, if it wanted to, could simply grant the application subject to appropriate conditions.
Yep.
Yeah.
In your hands, colleagues.
Yep.
I'm quite happy with that, convener.
Yep.
There was
Agree,
only,
convener.
there's only one point I would make, convener, although Mr. Blythe is talking about subject to conditions. Would that include provision for any potential widening of the junction at Vella Road?
I believe that's the case, Councillor Hughes. I think, if I recall from the consultation responses, that was one of the suggested conditions that the Roads Department had flagged up. So I think that would be one of the planning conditions that would be embedded in that permission.
Thank you.
Good point.
Everyone quite happy?
Happy, convener.
Yes, convener.
Convener,
Yes,
could I just,
convener.
Yeah.
so I beg your pardon, could I just clarify you're happy for the the issue, the preparation and issue of that decision notice to be delegated to the Director of Development Services and the Chief Governance Officer.
Yes, I would say so, yeah. Everyone else in agreement?
Everybody's
Agreed.
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 You anything else, Douglas?
That's all from me, convener. Thank you.
Catherine?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay. Right, well, thanks very much for your attendance this morning, your indulgence.